Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was summoned for the Red Faction and fall in love with Atalanta. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. As the night sky looks peaceful, down below shows a different story with the upcoming second battle of the Great Holy Grail War. Lancer of Red and Saber of Black had a battle against each other a day or two ago, with no victor, but both vowed to fight again to their heart's enjoyment. Now we see the massive muscle man known as Berserker of Red being surrounded by golems. The golems had attacked the Servant of Red, but failed to see the upcoming attack of the beast's sword and strength. By using his strength, Berserker of Red had easily overpowered the golems around him and destroyed them like the rocks they are. He soon laughed like manic, loving the pain and victory he gained in the small battle. However, the Berserker was not alone and had no idea that someone was following since he started to attack the Black Faction. 3 servants of the Red Faction watched their fellow ally servant from afar, being careful to not be seen by the giant and kept at a safe for the moment. The 3 servants were Archer, Rider, and Saber of Red. "Do you think we should just abandon Berserker and leave, Rider, Saber?" Archer asked, looking back to her allies. Saber thought about it, but didn't answer since Rider spoke first before him. "If you rather stay and talk him to stop it, then go ahead, Nae-san," Rider replied as he leaned up against the tree he rests on. "She doesn't like to be called that, Rider," Saber said in thought, while also on a tree branch and had his right hand up against his chin in knee-down position. "My true name is Atalanta. Stop calling me sister, Achilles, Archer, or Atalanta," snapped quietly before looking back at the mad servant. Saber waved his left hand and said, "He is just trying to form a sibling bond with you, Archer-chan. He means no hard feelings." That caused Rider or Achilles to laugh a little and said, "Fox is right. Don't sweat it." Atalanta grunted a little at both servants, but understood their words. Saber, or Fox, would add Chan into her name, both class and real name. Rider or Achilles would call her sister. So yeah, there was that, but moving on. "So anyway, how about we go take a look on what we are up against?" Achilles offered with a smile on his face. "It could work, and it might make it easy for us to get rid of the Black Faction skills," Fox agreed, seeing this as the right moment to find out what servants are on the other side, and maybe see their main weapons in action. "Very well, but if he unleashes his noble phantom, we fall back. Our masters will be fine with that," Atalanta said, watching the mad servant attacking more golems. Masters. That word hit to the core of the 3 servants, mostly Achilles and Fox now. The Rider servant looked at his right hand, thinking deeply of the pact he has with his master and was having a hard time it. The Saber servant wonders the same thing and wanted some answers. "Our masters, huh? Hey Fox, Nae-san, have you ever seen your master's face?" Achilles asked, being in deep in thought. Fox shook his head in no as his answered and said, "No, but it seems odd to me. I haven't either. The only master that I met was the priest that is assassin of Red's master." Atalanta resounded as she thinks about the pact and watched the mad servant in case it started to attack them. The pact is there. We gain information from our masters, orders come and go, but he or she never show themselves to us," Fox said, being troubled and started to shake his head of anything hard thoughts he had. "This is an odd situation," Achilles said as he agreed with Saber, understanding what he meant. Atalanta also agreed with them about their master and servant pact, being odd and needed some answer to their question. "It's normal for mages to hide and attack from the shadows, but this seems cowardly," Atalanta commented. Looking back at the mad servant, Berserker of Red kept attacking the foe and destroying anything he saw before him, taking the pain and laughing it off like it was nothing to him. "More. Give me more," the mad servant yelled like a maniac, enjoying the pain. This caused the 3 servants to have an odd feeling about him and looked at him weirdly with a bored look on their face. "Is this guy for real?" Fox asked with a raised eyebrow, standing up on his branch. "Yeah, he is, and it's only a matter of time before he uses his noble phantom," Achilles added with his eye closed. Atalanta sighed in agreement, but her expression changed when she started to sense something coming in and gotten her fellow allies to look at her. "What's wrong, Archer-chan?" Fox asked with concern in his voice. Something wrong? Achilles asked, also sharing a concerned look for his fellow Greek hero. Atalanta placed her right hand on her face, narrowing her eyes and started to see something far ahead of them. It's them, Atalanta replied, meaning that Black faction was coming. Fox nodded his head and said, after Berserker is dealt with by the Black faction, Rider wait for them in an area where Archer Chan and I can give you aid from afar. The Saber servant will have his moments where he was relaxed and calm, but during battle, he will be focused and understand what's ahead of them. You got it, Achilles said with a smile on his face as he took off, waiting for his part and moved to a new area. Let's follow him, Fox said. Agree, Atalanta said, before taking off with Saber following behind her. The two servants followed Rider and waited for at least one member of the Black faction. If there were more than two servants facing off against Achilles, Fox and Atalanta would step in, but even then, it would be unlikely that he would need help, since only those that are part god could hurt one of the greatest hero of Greece. They understood that, but they shouldn't let that go to their heads. If their enemy finds out about his weakness, then it will be all over. So, they'll take it one step at a time and wait for the servants of Black to arrive. Time skip. After Rider, ca. Stir and Lancer of Black have fought against Berserker of Red and captured him, the leader of the Black faction sent two servants to fight the three servants from the Red faction. No one saw a Crow Fr. Own the Sky that had watched the whole fight. Being a familiar of Saber's and send the whole fight it watched back to its master. Fox hummed to himself as he saw the whole fight and the two servants coming towards them. He and Archer of Red sat on a tree branch, while Rider waits in an open area for the two servants to arrive. You found something, Saber? Atalanta asked, getting herself ready and to summon her bow and arrow to support their ally. Fox nodded his head and said, yes, my crow has told me that Saber and Berserker of Black are coming to us. They will face off against Rider soon enough. While we wait for an opening to strike. Agreed, inform Rider of what you know, Atalanta agreed ordered, summoning her bow and had an arrow in her hands, being ready to fire. Understood. Fox agreed before proceeding to speak with Rider of Red telepathically. Rider, two servants are coming your way, with them being Saber and Berserker. Be ready, Fox informed, summoning his black kunai launcher. Understood, Achilles replied, waiting for the servants of Black to show up. Soon enough, Achilles saw Saber and Berserker of Black while resting on tree and stood upright to greet them. You two had me waiting. Saber and Berserker, I presume? Achilles asked, knowing who they are and caused Berserker to grunt her teeth at him. In the shadows in trees, Fox and Atalanta waited for an opening strike and allowed Rider of Red to fight on his own. Darn, I'm held in such low regard. Sending only two to handle me? Achilles asked, while closing his eyes before opening them back up. I'm offended, Achilles shouted with a smirk on his face and scared many crows to fly away. The two servants Black got their guard up, being ready to fight. Rider is my class, but I won't be using my chariot. It'd be grossly disproportionate against only two of you, Achilles said, pointing his spear at his enemies. Saber and Berserker of Black ready themselves against the Rider of Red, knowing that this Rider class servant will not make it easy for them nor will they let up. I'll beat the meaning of a real hero, a real warrior into you, Achilles added, getting ready for servants to come at him. Saber of Black attacked first while Achilles easily blocked and countered Saber's attacks. He even saw Berserker coming at him from behind, and attacked her legs, causing her to fall into the ground. Saber saw an opening to attack the Rider from behind, but failed and his sword was grabbed before being stabbed in the shoulder while grunting a little in pain, before backing away. Saber and Berserker soon regrouped. Seeing that Rider of Red wasn't a servant to take lightly, Achilles tried to talk to Saber into smiling or laughing, but the knight spoke that it might offend others on the battlefield. This caused Rider to close his eyes and waited for his two allies to strike at the opening. Yeah, but it could also lead to salvation, Achilles said, as an arrow and kunai flew past him towards their target. Saber grunted in pain as he was launched back by the arrow and kunai, onto a tree. He widens his eyes and saw two servants in the shadows of the trees, noticing it was a trap. The sneak attack from Nay-san and Fox work out perfect. Since our side lost its Berserker, I think it's fair to evening the odds, Achilles said, pointing his spear at the mad servant girl. Berserk. R grunted her teeth in anger and started to power herself up, causing green lightning to move across her mace. Achilles narrowed his eyes little, but didn't see her as a threat to him, though he kept guard and spear up. Before the two servants can attack, Saber somehow got of the tree and pulled his sword to active his noble phantom, having a blue aura surround him and his sword. Achilles challenged the Saber of Black to show what he can do, but soon was shocked that the servant stopped all of a sudden and disappeared in spirit form. He was taken back and wondered what was going on, maybe his master was upset with him or forced him to retreat. Something was off, but he can now deal with other servant with no trouble. That's a shame, Achilles commented, before turning his attention back to Berserker. The mad servant was about to attack, but stopped to listen to her master first, before going in. Now then, Achilles said, but was cut off when golden arrow shot out of nowhere and into his left shoulder. Ryder grunted in pain a little and was shocked by the sudden attack. Shocked that he felt pain, and that someone caught him off guard. He can tell that the servant that fired at him was an archer-class servant. But he didn't know who. Before he could be saying else, more arrows fire at him and acted to roll out of the way. Berserker lugged at him, but changed her plan and ran into the forest to find the two servants. TCH, so you've come, Berserker of Black, Atalanta said as she draws her bow and arrow out, having the arrow covered in green mana and ready to fire it well. Though Saber didn't use his kunai launcher, and waited to strike, if another servant comes out. For your recklessness, you'll pay for it in blood, Atalanta shouted, before firing her mana-covered arrow towards Mad Servant. But before the arrow hit Berserker, another arrow came out nowhere and shoot the other down like it was nothing. This shocked the two servants of Red, on how fast the Archer of Black was and how he can hurt Rider of Red. The other archer, fine then, Atalanta called out before firing 3 arrows at the Mad Servant girl. The Berserker of Black kept moving forward towards the two servants of Red. The archer and Saber were about to strike, but then it hit them like bullet and they understood what was going on. I see, Fox said with a smile appearing underneath his mask. I guess this is it, Atalanta commented with a smirk on her face before her and her ally jumped out of the way. Berserker of Black clashed into the tree, having fall and saw the Red servants leaving all of a sudden. Saber and Archer were smart and need to fall back, the servants of Black will come after them and they need to regroup. Berserker of Black, we will put our fight on hold for now. Rider fall back, Fox called out before disappearing into the shadows with the Archer of Red. Achilles heard his ally said but was having a hard time fighting off Archer of Black. The archer could hurt him and know all his moves. This made him happy that he found a servant that could be a challenge for him and looked forward in fighting him again, but the next he will see his face. Rider of Red soon called his chariot and used it to make his getaway. The servants of Red had what they need and will report to ally servants. Time skip. It has been a few days since the attack on Black faction and both sides losing a servant that day. Berserker of Red was captured and Saber of Black gave his life to save someone else. It shocked the whole Red faction and wondered why he would do that, but it didn't matter. Lancer of Red was down that he will never fight the Saber again and focus on the matter at hand. Which follows for the other servants as well, being ready to attack the Black faction once again, but on a larger scale. We soon found Saber of Red resting himself on tree by the church that Priest Shuru allowed the Red faction to rest at, until his plan was ready. Fox couldn't tell what yet, but felt that Assassin of Red had a part in it, and it was going to be big. He then grabbed something out his sage robe and started to play a little music on his flute, being the song his past lover would play for him. Fox closed his eyes and started to play the song he loved so much during his past life. Many of the Red faction heard the song and wonder who was playing it, but only found no answer as to who playing the music. However, one servant found who played and was that Atalanta, who was taken back of music that Saber of Red played. Atalanta was scouting the forest in case familiars, mages, or servants from the Black faction would try to stage an attack, but with Assassin and Saber's familiars watching the area and have traps ready at the wait. It looks hard to get in, but it never hurts to look around. But she stopped when she heard someone playing a music not too far from where she was at and followed it to find Fox playing a flute. She didn't know he played music and felt arm when hearing the music playing out loud. Soon the music stopped playing to the archer's disappointment as she wanted to hear more, but shook her head and smiled at the servant. Before she could leave though, Archer soon heard a familiar voice call her name, causing her to stop in mid-step. Atalanta-chan, you can come on out now, Fox called out, before standing up onto his feet to see the Archer of Red about to leave. Who stopped to turn around? Atalanta turned around and said, I'm sorry if I stopped your music. I was just listening, and it was never my intention to bug you, Fox. Fox shook his head while putting his flute away. It's fine, I was done anyway, Atalanta-chan, Fox replied before walking towards the Archer. Atalanta nodded her and watched the Saver-class servant walk away. Your music was beautiful, Fox. May I ask how to learn that? Atalanta asked with a little blush on her face. This stopped the servant and sighed to himself as he looked up to the sky while not turning around to face the Archer servant. I learned through my travels around forest or different villages I travel. I picked it up from a friend of mine and she taught me how to play the flute. And later I become great at it. But never at the level of my old friend showed me, Fox answered as he looked down into the ground, remembering his past. Atalanta may not see but could tell and seen that Fox was having a hard time with his past life. She didn't want this to affect him or give trouble thoughts during this second life. For some unknown reason the huntress wants to help this unknown servant. She can't tell what it was. But trust herself to help her fellow servant. I didn't mean to open up any old wounds, Fox. If you want to talk about then I will be there and if not, that's fine, Atalanta said. While turning around to look at the servant, Fox was taken back at the Archer and felt that her words were true. Only a few people in his past life were kind to him and opened his heart to them return. He missed his past life, but vowed to enjoy this second life and find something. He doesn't know yet, but has a feeling that he will find out one day in this second life as a servant. My thanks, Atalanta-chan. I will let you know when I am ready, Fox said before going into spirit form, leaving the huntress taken back. Atalanta was taken back that Fox agreed to talk her when he was ready and maybe share who he is. He hasn't told the other servants who he was or what was his reasons for joining the Grail War. It wasn't that he didn't want them to find his name or past life, it was due. Saint that he wasn't so sure if humans or other heroic spirits knew his history. Maybe fear, but she wasn't sure, and he now was opening to the Archer-class servant. There is hope after all. Time skip. Great Holy Grail War made its way towards the midpoint of the conflict, and the factions between red and black are broken. The Grail was no longer about the color of sides going against each other, but a battle between rulers and their servants. The red servant's mind's assassin found out that the priest, Shuru Kotomine or by his true name, Amakusa Shuru Tokasada had gained all their former Asters, command spells and is now the sole master of the red faction. Karna, Achilles, Atalanta, and Fox waited for answers from their new master. Semiramis stood by her master's side with a small smile on her face. The four servants waited for Shuru to explain himself and where their masters were. Fox stood quietly as Shuru explained himself and what happened to the other masters. The other masters had planned on dealing with each other than fighting as one against the other faction. So, the priest and the assassin servant put them in a coma with poison. It made sense to the sage and he felt no evil thoughts from his new master. It was clear and made sense to him, but he was unsure for the other servants. I'm fine with change of master, Atalanta said as she steps forward. Just like that Nay-san? Achilles asked, being taken back of Archer of Red to agree with the new master. I don't follow dishonorable and cowards. If it means to follow a new master for my wish, then I am fine with the change, Atalanta answered. Having her mind made up and had her eyes set on one wish she had in mind. Karna stood quiet and looked like he was fine with his new master, but still had a few things on his mind. What about you, Saver? Shuru asked, getting his attention and other servants to look at him. Fox shrugged his shoulders and said, I'm fine with you as my new master. You show no sinful attentions towards us and you kept our former masters in a coma-like state. I would have done something like that, but something different, to avoid any infighting. I don't care who is my master, I only want to fulfill my duties as a servant. The duties of a servant are understandable. I make sure you fulfill it. Naruto Uzumaki Senju, Shuru said, getting the servants to look at Fox in surprise on who he is. Fox tch through his teeth and know that a ruler would know his true name. The other servants looked at the saver servant in different views and some understand his reason to hide his true self from the others. Ellipsis. Naruto Uzumaki Senju was known by some as a nine-tailed fox, but to most the second sage of the six paths. His story starts with his parents leaving after birth due to fear and hate of their child being the fox itself, but they were wrong. Naruto would have died that day, but he was saved by Tsunade Senju and was raised as her own son. During his late teens, Naruto fought in war between Konoha and other villages. The other villages had enough with Konoha and their prideful ninjas and want them to end it. Naruto joined the Lightning, Mist, and Stone village to Owl with Leaf village and won many battles for them. In those battles only one ninja was a challenge for the sage and that was his own young brother, Menma Namikaze. Naruto and Menma fought in many less with the sage being the winner and the war was close over. Kushina had begged Naruto to not fight Menma and even told him who he is which caused anger within the sage. If you loved me, then you won't have left me to the wolves. I only have one mother and she not you, but Tsunade Senju. Kushina knew it was and cried her heart out for being a bad mother. Naruto allowed her to leave and never come back. Soon enough the war was over, and Naruto was seen hero to all. He lived a peaceful life with 5 wives and a lot of children. He lived his life and later died of old age. He didn't cry, hate, or fear death but welcomed it with a smile on his face and rested his life. His tale was soon recorded into the throne of heroes and could be summoned as a saver class servant. Ellipsis. Yes, I am Naruto Uzumaki Senju, the second sage of the six paths. I lived my first life fine and only seek to do it in the second life, Fox. Naruto said, finally speaking. He was fine with the other servants now. Who he is since he no longer need to worry about infighting or the other servants knowing his true self anymore. Now moving past that, I will ask one question from all of you. What's your wish? Shuru asked his servants. The ruler already knows Semiramis, wish and wonder about the others. Achilles sighed as lowered his guard and said, my wish is the same as before. To live and die like a hero. Such a selfless wish from one of the greatest heroes of Greece, Semiramis commented. You will be surprised to find that some servants still viewed their past wish to be their true wish, Karna sighed. D with his eyes closes and had a smile growing on his face which caused the wise queen to glare at him. I can't help be a little selfless. It reminds me of a certain empress I know, Achilles said with smile on his face. You don't say. Semiramis said with a grin and upset look in her eyes, knowing what the Greek hero meant. Naruto raised an eyebrow, wondering what was going to happen between writer and assassin. From what he can tell not good and hopes to keep them and everyone else from fighting each other. Atalanta then spoke, my wish is to save all children. Such a naive wish is nothing, but foolish. Semiramis commented like she didn't believe of wish and understand it a point of view. A foolish wish. Why is it a foolish wish? Then what is the Grail? 4. Atalanta questioned napped at the Empress and was close on attacking but a hand was placed on her right shoulder stopped her all of a sudden. Naruto had placed his right hand onto the archer of Red's shoulder to calm her down and not attack a fellow servant. Once Atalanta calmed down, the sage let go of her and turned his attention back towards ruler and assassin of Red. It's her wish and I am all right with that. Can the Grail grant Atalanta's wish? Naruto asked. If it is her wish then the Grail will grant it, Shuru replied. Naruto nodded his head and said, good. And for my wish, I have none. This surprised the servants and ruler. The second sage of the six paths doesn't want a wish from the Grail and why was he here in the first place? Every servant was summoned for a goal or regret their life to be summoned into the Grail War. I can see some of you are wondering why a servant like me is no wish. The wish I want, I'm already doing it now, to live a second life and fulfill my duties as a servant. If I do then I can be fine with the outcome of Grail War, Naruto answered as he crossed his arms. Then you will have it savor. Now what about your wish Karna? Shuru asked the last servant his wish. Rna got up from leaning against the rails and walked towards the other servants. My wish, should be a simple one. A simple wish. I hope you, my master, would allow me to fulfill it, Karna answered as pointed his spear at priest. If it's about your rematch with Saber of Black, then I will allow it, Shuru said, giving the son of the sun god his answer. Karna nodded his head as he lowered his spear and was deep in thought. Naruto could guess what the Lancer servant has in mind and would leave it at that. Short time skip. Nothing has happened so far and only the other servants have been dealing with the assassin of Black. Ruler or Jeanne d'Arc and other servants are hunting the little girl assassin named Jack the Ripper. The Red faction were focused on leaving the area to have the fight in air with hanging gardens at their sides, and nothing much has happened. Naruto was walking around the garden, loving view it greeted and how it was built. If something like this was around his time, he would have built and might help during the civil war he fought in. He was hoping he could spend time with Atalanta and maybe play his flute again with her by his side, but she was on a mission and won't be back for a while. The Saver class servant sighed as he kept walking but stopped when he heard someone yelling something filth to someone and heard a chuckled. He walked towards where he heard Omething and saw that Achilles and Semiramis had a talk. By the looks of it, it didn't end well. Once the rider servant faded away to wander around, leaving a very mad queen to herself and allowed Saver to walk towards her. Empress Semiramis, Naruto said, getting her attention towards him as he took a knee in front of her. Semiramis turned around and was taken back at the Saver of Red kneeling for her like if he was a servant to her. Yes, Saver, Semiramis asked, wondering what the servant wanted and hoped it wasn't like the talk she had with Ryder. I was wondering if you will allow me to join Archer of Red in her mission to search for Assassin of Black. 2 servants could make it faster to search 1 servant, Naruto responded. Semiramis raised an eyebrow and wondered what the sage was up to. She crossed her arms on her chest, causing blonde-haired Sag to lower his head. This surprised the Empress that he didn't look at her. Raise your head, I will like a forward answer than one from a servant, Semiramis said, like she was telling her servant to speak to her normally. Naruto raised his head with a nod and looked at her eyes, then her body to answered her. I will like to help Atalanta-chan because I have a feeling that Assassin of Black, or Jack the Ripper, might hurt her in some way. How she will hurt her is unknown to me now, but with your permission I would like to her, Empress Semiramis, Naruto said. Honestly and in a calm voice. Semiramis was taken back on how Naruto would go on to a mission to fight with Atalanta and ask her permission. This was new to her and she wondered about it. Why asks my permission? Semiramis asked. You are Shuru's servant and second in command of the Red faction. I think it's fair to ask for your permission, Empress. Semiramis. Naruto replied before standing up on his feet. Semiramis hummed to herself, thinking about letting the Saver go or not. Once she made up her mind, Semiramis let sigh before saying, I will allow it, Saver. But only join if Archer is in danger. Don't get involved with her mission. If she is in trouble with other servants or has trouble with Assassin of Black, then you may help her. Short time skip. The hunt for Assassin of Black had reached at the end and things were getting interesting to say at least. Atalanta had killed Jack, but awakened her wraiths and unleashed her fury onto Archer, Jean, and Sieg. Showing the dark side of life. Atalanta was torn apart to save the children and V-zones of her past life, causing her to be affected by the wraiths. Jean was able to walk past the WRAITHS and knew there was only one thing was left to do to the wraith children. Sieg was having a hard time at learning the hard truth of what humans could do in life. But the 3 failed to notice the T1 servant was with them in the fog and wraiths didn't affect him, but called for help and wanted to play with him. Atalanta stands between Jean and the wrath children with Sieg watching from the sidelines to see where it goes. The ruler only know one way to save the wraths, that was to put them to rest, but Archer was not going to allow that, unable stand to seeing children be killed. They are just children. These children aren't evil, but victims. They are pitiful souls that were crushed by the structure of this world. Atalanta shouted as she draws her bow and arrow, aiming it at Jean. And you're trying to kill them. I can't forgive something like that. Atalanta yelled as she fired her arrow but missed her target when Jean tilted her head to the side. They need to be put to rest, Atalanta, and move aside. Jean shouted, trying to talk with the Greek huntress. I refuse. If I abandon these children, Then who will love them? Will your god do it? Atalanta questioned, shouted at Ruler. Jean, stay quiet, not speaking a word. Ruler, you said you'd put their souls to rest. That's murder and nothing more. I would never, Atalanta yelled, but stopped herself when she felt something familiar was in the area. Jean's eyes widened and felt something was in the area, being another servant, which shocked her. She only felt Ryder and Archer of Black were outside and couldn't get into the fog. Sieg was felt the servant coming and had one question, who was in there with them? That will be enough, a voice said as the servant comes out his sprite form, showing himself to the two servants and one master. Savor. Jean gasped in surprise and was getting the information form the Grail to who was the servant is in front, causing to be even more shock of what servant was in front of her. Naruto. Atalanta gasped in total shock of the sudden appeases of her fellow servant. Hello Atalanta-chan, Ruler, Master San. Sorry if I am a little late and have a better way foe. Are these children to be put to rest by not killing them? Naruto said as he walked in between the two servants. Naruto Uzumaki Senju, stand aside. These children are wraths born from sins and must go to rest to find peace. Jean said with her eyes narrowed. She was not looking forward in fighting two servants at once and a command spell was always in option but wants to avoid that. Naruto didn't move but sighed and said, no, Ruler. I will not stand aside and let children get killed. As a sage I have another way for the wraths to have peace and allow Atalanta-chan's wish would stay. True. I believed in her and her wish to save children to have a happy. While it maybe be a hard one, I still believe it in her. Jean and Sieg could tell that Savor was not going to let up or allow something happen under his watch. Atalanta was taken back of Naruto coming here and want her wish to stay true. Her thoughts were running around her head of someone believing her wish in herself, causing her to be shocked for words. Naruto then walked towards Atalanta as he took off his mask and showed her his face for the first time, causing her to blush of his facial. He was a young handsome with sun-kissed blonde hair, ocean blue eyes. 3 whisker marks on each side of his cheeks, fox-like ears and soon a tail came out. He made his mask to hide his looks from other servants since a few could guess from his fox looks to who he is. But he wants help the archer in front of him. Before Atalanta could speak, Naruto leaned forward to kiss the huntress on the forehead, causing her blush deeper and felt warm all of a sudden. The blonde-haired sage smiled before turning his attention towards the wraths to say a few words and help to rest. Kids, it's time to go home for bed, playtime is over. Big brother is going to take you home now. Come along little ones, Naruto said with a warm smile on his face as he took a knee in front of the children. All the children started to rush at the blonde-like little siblings to their older sibling, causing Jean, Atalanta and Sieg to be shocked and wonder what was happening. Soon all the children bond together to come back to their normal in one form, Jack the Ripper, to hug the big brother figure in front of her and smiled warmly within the warm embrace. Naruto hugged Jack with a smile on his face as his body started to glow in blue energy and started to contact with nature. Assassin's body was disappearing in blue dust of energy with gold lights around her and felt warmer all of a sudden in the arms of the sage. It's time to go, Oni-chan, Jack asked, being afraid to leave and not see the two people that touched her heart. Her master, the mother figure and now an older brother figure. Naruto nodded his head and said, yes, it is time to go, Jack bu. Maybe in the next life we could spend time together and maybe play at the playground. Does that sound nice, little sister? Jack smiled and nodded her head with tears in her eyes. Naruto wrapped the chairs away with his right hand and watched the assassin of Black fade away, returning to the throne and leaving the Grail War. Jean, Sieg, and Atalanta were heart-taken by what happened and how the Aver servant dealt with the problem. While it could have done what Ruler wanted but to different outcome, that was fine. The sage smiled sadly before standing him and watched the black fog left up all of a sudden, showing the sun was about come out and felt 2 servants coming in close, meaning it was time to leave. Atalanta-chan, let's go. Ryder and Archer of Black are on their way and the Missy on in dealing with Assassin of Black is done, Naruto informed his fellow servant. Atalanta snapped back and nodded her head. She was to move but soon felt weak and fall onto her knee. The Greek archer soon found out that she was still a little weak from the fog and her strength was returning to her at a slow pace. Naruto walked over towards the archer and carried her in his arms like a knight would do for a princess, causing her to blush and felt warm in his arms all sudden. "What's going on?" Atalanta asked herself in thought, wondering why she was acting like this all of a sudden. This was new to her and she had a few questions to ask the blonde-haired sage when they get back to base. Naruto carried Atalanta and took off before the other servants could get them as they went into spirit form, leaving the black faction behind and make their way back to Hanging Gardens. Once the two servants made it back the gardens and came out of their spirit forms, Naruto still carried Atalanta in his arms before putting her to stand on her feet and felt her strength back to full strength again. "My thanks Naruto for helping me in dealing with Assassin of Black and giving those children peace the right way." Atalanta thanked her fellow servant with small smile on her face. On way back to the gardens, Naruto had told what he did for Jack to the huntress and she was happy that he did his sage acts to help them find peace. Nature is a very powerful and yet peaceful thing that can happen to anyone in life or death. "You're welcome, Atalanta-chan. I hope Jack finds peace and we will meet again on the same side one day," Naruto replied as he looks up to the sky before returning his gaze back to the archer. Atalanta blushed a little and turned her head away to not the blonde to see her blush. Shish. Fought the blush off and wanted a question to be answered that she had in mind for some time now. "Why do you believe in my wish so much, Naruto?" Atalanta asked, wondering why the sage would go his way to help her. Naruto looked at Atalanta, looking deeply to her eyes and couldn't help himself in blush on how beautiful she looks. He had the huntress, beautiful and a one of a kind he met but he's that aside to answer her question first. "Because I believe that children should have wonderful young childhood with happiness, care, and love. I was left to the wolves by my former parents and old have died but my true mother found me and give me those things. While growing with her, I vowed to not let children have a life of pain and regret but gain the same life I gained and will remember that. Your wish might be a hard one but not a one I am against and will help along the towards that wish, Atalanta-chan," Naruto responded, truthful and honest to the huntress in front of him. Atalanta looked at the sage before smiling at his answer and felt warm inside when around him. She won't lie and say she felt something towards Naruto, but she promised and vowed to her goddess, Artemis being her follower first before anything. It was understandable, but she can't help herself and feel warm when around the sage. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," Atalanta said with a small smile and blush on her face, causing Naruto smiled back at her. Soon enough the two servants left, going their separate ways for a moment and will talk another time. It's been a long day and some rest was in order. Time skip. The Great Holy Grail War was reaching its end. The two sides were ready to fight each other for the Grail or to fulfill a wish of their own. This Holy Grail War was getting close to the end. Who will win? That's unknown. Who will get their wish? By the Grail or by themselves? It's unknown but answers will come during the fight that's to come. Saber of Red had watched his fellow servants going after the enemy servants and stand on the tallest tower of the Hanging Gardens. Achilles and Archer of Black or Chiron were fighting on one of the airplanes. Karna fought Rider of Black or Astolfo Sieg before going into a one-on-one fight between Lancer and Saber. Those fights he didn't pay much attention towards since his fellow servants wants that fight and focused on one fight that made him worried. Atalanta and Jeanne d'Arc were fighting and it was not going well. In her rage and anger from what ruler want to do and vowed to kill her, Atalanta used her second noble phantom, being a curse one name. Agrius Metamorphosis. Boar of Divine Punishment. It was pelt from the Caledonian boar that the huntress herself brought down. It changes her to become an altar or berserker class serve. And by losing herself and fought the ruler servant in anger. Naruto could feel the hate coming within Atalanta and felt sad for her. She was losing herself even more by each second that goes by. He couldn't allow this nor allowed the fight keep on coming. If she keeps it help, he feared that the Greek archer will lose sight of her dream and herself deeply before self-destruction. He was not going to allow this or stand by and do nothing. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he took off with a powerful kick and dashed towards where the fight was at with great speed. within flames and wind following behind. The blonde-haired sage dashed towards the fight between Atalanta and Jean was held at. He saw the huntress firing arrows covered in dark purple mana and felt dark, having all them aiming at ruler in hate and anger. Evening knowing that he will have to fight her if he steps, but he wasn't going to stand by and allow someone he cares about losing herself. By gathering his mana to flow into his eyes and take off his mask. Naruto's ocean blue eyes changed into light purple eyes with 5 ripples in them and chatted his noble phantom. Almighty push. Sage God's touch. Naruto shouted, launching. A powerful wave of wind mana burst and creating a barrier to destroy all the arrows in one move. Once the arrows were destroyed, Jean was shocked that it was Naruto that helped her and caused Atalanta to get angry that someone jumped in. That's enough. Your fight is with me, Atalanta-chan, Naruto said as he walked forward to be 5 feet away and between the 2 servants. Get the hell out of my way, Saver. Atalanta yelled in venom and rage. Naruto shook his head before looking back at Jean and said, please go, let me fight her. But Jean said, being shocked that Saver's servant want to fight Archer in her place and she could that he didn't want to fight her, but why? A hero's cord, ruler. If someone falls in darkness, a hero must come and help in any way he or she can. I want to help Atalanta-chan and pull her out of that darkness. So, allow me to fight her and allow you to find Amakusa Shuru, Naruto answered as he draws out his kanata in flames, red flagon into his right hand. Jean didn't spoke and soon understand to reason why the sage servant would fight. She saw it in his eyes that he cares deeply for the huntress and will do anything for her, even it means to fight her to save from own darkness and destruction. Very well, Naruto, Jean said as she took off, running away from the battle to allow the 2 servants fight it out. Get back here, Atalanta shouted and was about to ran after her target but was stopped by Saver with a swing of his sword. Naruto swings his kanata towards the right, creating wind burst and cut through ground to stop He Archer of red and focus on him instead of ruler servant. A new fight was starting, battle between 2 servants of red and only one or no one will walk out of it. I have some regrets in my life. During the Civil War, I lost friends and killed some enemies I wish I could have saved. Now I am fighting the one person I don't want to fight, but to save her from herself, I must fight her and pray for a good outcome. Naruto thought as he got himself ready. Please forgive me, Atalanta-chan, Naruto mumbled to himself and got himself ready to fight. Atalanta roared in pure rage as she fires her mana-covered arrows towards the sage, causing Naruto to act and dashed towards Lion Huntress to avoid the arrows. The blonde-haired sage blocked all the arrows with a swing of his kanata and kept following behind the Lion Huntress. Arrows fired down onto the sage as he kept swing his blade to block the upcoming attacks and jumped after his opponent. Naruto swung his red flag downwards, causing Atalanta to raise her bow up and block the attack. The sage pushed his blade down, causing the Lion Huntress to growl and pushed it. The 2 servants push against their weapon against the other but failed. The archer servant swung her right lug upwards towards the sage. This caused the blonde-haired sage to be launched backwards and landed on stone rock in the air. He landed on it and focused on the up-coming mana-covered arrows flying at him. Almighty push. Sage God's touch. Naruto shouted, launching a powerful wave. His wind mana burst to create a barrier and destroyed the first wave of arrows. A second wave of arrows were flying towards the sage and he couldn't use his noble phantom twice. Naruto had little choice in the matter and lower himself to launch himself at the archer. With a powerful focus and kick, the Saver servant launched himself towards Atalanta. This caused her to fire a hailstorm arrows towards the sage, causing him to grunt in pain of the arrows in him, but shook it off and kept moving forward towards his target. Naruto thrusted his red flag forwards towards his targets, being the right shoulder and stomach to wound the archer servant enough. Atalanta had little me to move out of the way and was wide open for the sage to strike. The blonde-haired servant landed heavily blow onto the archer, causing her to grunt and later groan from her heavily wounds she gained. This caused the 2 servants to land on the ground with the sage holding the archer in his arms but failed to see 3 arrows coming down to him. First arrow landed in the stomach, second the fourth shoulder to cause pain in the left arm, and third close to the spirit core, causing Naruto to grunt in pain and had blood coming out his mouth from the inner pain he felt. He shook it off a little, to raise his right hand to grab the right shoulder where the pelt formed and peeled off, causing the mad enhancement and curse to fade away to cause Atalanta to revert to her normal self. Naruto-kun, Atalanta mumbled in pain and smiled a little when seeing the fox sage in front of her. Naruto brought her up close to him and hugged her, being careful to not cause any more pain for them. What would you have me do? I just want to save and show those children love and happiness, but ruler wanted to bring them peace by her way and you showed a different way to bring peace to them. Is my wish strength not good enough for all of the children of the world? Atalanta asked with some tears in her eyes. Naruto used his left hand to rub her face and clean the tears away before smiling at the archer. Your wish is not wrong and is a pure wish that I will help all the way. I believe in your wish and know that is not wrong. I believe in you for who you are, Atalanta-chan, Naruto responded, with small smile on his face as he held the lion huntress in his arms. Atalanta was heart-taken by Naruto's words and happy to have someone believe in her for being herself. She never met a servant like the sage before and wished that they have met before then a Holy Grail war. They would have a great time and bring her wish to reality. Now both have a little time since they were heavily wounded, and would return to the throne soon enough. Just need a little more time, the two servants thought as they can feel their bodies were slowly fading back to the throne but had time to say a few words and do one more thing. Atalanta used all her strength to wrap her arms around the blonde's neck and moved upwards towards close to Naruto, doing something that surprised both. She kissed the blonde sage on his lips and felt sudden warmth in her body. Naruto was taken back and shocked that the lion huntress in front of him was kissing him, but soon closed his eyes and returned the kiss. The lion and fox kissed the other and felt warm in each other's arms. Once the kiss had ended, Naruto and Atalanta rested their heads up against each other and soon felt their bodies fading. Their time in the Grail was almost over but had time to say a few words. If we met again Naruto-kun, I wish we can get to know each other more. I want my wish to come true with you by my side, Atalanta said with her eyes closed and held the blonde close to her. I hope we met again, Atalanta-chan. I never believed in fate, but I hope we met again. When we do, I will help with your wish and spend a new life with you by each other's side. Naruto said as he held the archer closer to her and smiled. Atalanta smiled as her body was slowly fading in blue dust of energy and Naruto's was doing the same. The two servants held the other in their arms and felt warm. They still have time for something to say before disappearing. I love you, Naruto-kun, Atalanta said with a smile as her whole body disappears but had enough to hear the blonde say something to her. I love you too, Atalanta-chan, Naruto said with a smile as his body disappears with the woman in his arms and felt warm when the two servants faded back to the throne of heroes. As the two servants disappeared in each other's arms with no regrets and just smile while believing and hoping that the two would meet again. Time skip grand order, and the two servants were right, they did meet again. Atalanta was summoned into the Grand Order Holy Grail War and fought with her master. She remembered little of her past Grail War but remembered the servants had fought in war and a promise that she kept to herself. That promise was to meet the man she loved and vowed to keep on fighting for the two to meet again. Naruto was summoned in his timeline and so on fought alongside his fellow servants and new master to save the many eras throughout timeline. He was soon met the woman he fallen in love with and both were happy. Now we soon see the saver and archer servant in the same room they shared, being a mixed Greek and Japanese room style. Naruto wore a robe with black boxer shorts and sat down at his desk to write a few things down, being what was happening so far and how his new life was going. Atalanta was taking a nice and warm shower to clean herself for the night and give the man she loves a reward. The two servants act like a merry couple, and both were fine that since Naruto had beaten Atalanta in a foot race fair and square. The huntress was happy to be married to a man that was fair to her and loved for who she is. Artemis was happy for them to find love in the right way and give them her blessing for a happy life. The sounds of footsteps brought Naruto out his thought and turned around to see the woman he loves, which caused him to blush when seeing what she wore in front of him. It was formal dress that Atalanta would wear during dance and parties in different time eras that their master will take them to. 1. Atalanta-chan, you know that dress is for dates. Naruto stuttered with his blush growing as the lioness moved forward towards him. I know, but I decided to give my future husband and the man I love a reward for being himself. Atalanta replied with a grin as she walks up to Naruto. The lion huntress hugged her husband, rested her head against his chest. Well, me being your husband is fine enough for me. What do you have in mind? Naruto asked, causing Atalanta looked up at him with an intimate smirk on her face. True, Naruto-kun, very true. Now allow me to give your reward, Atalanta said as she undid his robe and left him in only his boxers, and she could see his manhood beginning to awaken from seeing her in her outfit. So, are you ready for your reward, Naruto-kun? Atalanta asked as she continued to stroke his erection inside of his boxers. What do you think, Atalanta-chan? Naruto teasingly responded while massaging her ample, yet soft chest, causing Atalanta purred at the feeling of his strong hands groping her bosom. I think we're about to have some fun, Atalanta said as she slid his boxers from him and licked her lips at seeing his exposed member. The lion huntress then pulled Sage to their bed before falling back onto the bed with him on top of her. Naruto and Atalanta exchanged amorous stares before he stripped his wife from her dress, exposing her curvaceous and toned body to him. The fox sage smiled at his wife sexy, as the lion huntress marveled at his size as she purred in delight and held the back of his head to her bosom as he began gnawing on them. Atalanta mewed as he carefully clenched the tumultuous flesh and slowly grinded his teeth on the orb. He proceeded to tweak and tease the opposing tit with his fingers, pulling at all the while, and she continued to purr in pleasure. The young woman's green eyes glistened as she felt her clit and folds being rubbed at simultaneously by his fingers. Naruto's tongue wormed and swayed within Atalanta tunnels, while her legs continued to cringe and twitch from his touch. Naruto's hands slid under the lion huntress's ass and lifted her lower body off the ground while she freed her chest to dig her nails into the bed. The sage moaned while slobbering and drenching her inner walls with his saliva until she gave a final moan of pleasure as her orgasmic streams began to flow from her wetness. Naruto eagerly licked up her release and gently set her down on her back once he was finished. She panted and looked up at him while licking her lips. Impressed by how hard it was, Atalanta smiled at her husband's member and rubbed her orbs together while he started sending it into her cleavage. Her tongue tapped at the emerging foreskin of Naruto's glory and her saliva was lathered across the tip. Naruto, she stirred her tongue around the tip before eventually taking it into her mouth and sucking on the tip. Naruto placed his hands on either side of the lion huntress and she thoroughly enjoyed its taste as she took her time sucking on it. Naruto's member shot into her heaving bosom and she moaned as she closed her eyes while rubbing her orbs of flesh on him. He loudly groaned as the sensation of her off-chest massaging his manhood was already making him sweat profusely, and Atalanta temporarily opened her mouth to blow on its throbbing head. This made him shiver before she placed her mouth back on it and lightly brushed her tongue on his foreskin. He loudly moaned as his manhood unleashed his semen into her mouth and she waited until it was over with before drinking most of it. Naruto removed his member from Atalanta's mouth and she panted before licking her lips at him. She reached up to trace his whiskers and tenderly smiled at him, a look he softly returned. Hey Atalanta-chan, care to switch places? Naruto asked, causing his wife smiled in response. Fine with me Naruto-kun, Atalanta answered before she got up and stood at the foot of the bed, and this allowed Naruto to lay back before he looked up at his new lover. The sage lowered his wife down onto his hardness and took his time in pushing the head of his member through her area. Atalanta's flushed face grew deeper as her warmth sank down his member and he moaned from tight she was with her inside spreading from accepting him. Once Naruto was finally inside of Atalanta, the pair moaned from the mutual loss of their virginities. Both are virgins when becoming heroic spirits, rebirth dud, and placed her hands on his shoulders. After giving his wife some time to adjust to his size, they began to thrust against one another and he stood on the bed with Atalanta wrapping her legs around his waist. Naruto's hands took hold of her ass and held onto her like so while pummeling his member into her tunnels with the lion huntress bucking her hips against him. Naruto pounded into her fiery depths as she held onto him and Atalanta's tongue met his as they licked against the other. The lion huntress's insides were thrash. Eden slammed against by the sage's mighty thrusts with her nails digging into his shoulder. The lion huntress felt her husband manhood striking against her womb and his great speed produced sweat on their forms. He held onto her chest and peach simultaneously with her fingers continuing to brush through his hair. She moaned into his mouth as their tongues clashed and licked against the other while sweat glistened down their forms. He temporarily stopped groping her ass before running his fingers through her hair and her hand moved to his cheek as her thumb stroked his whisker marks obsessive. Ely and they broke their kiss apart to moan as loud as they could manage. Their eyes opened, and she brushed her hand through his locks before cleaning some of the sweat from it. Doing the same thing in return, Atalanta panted from feeling his growth swell and vibrate inside of her walls as she simultaneously grew tighter on him. The sage gritted his teeth together from his tightening balls and she leaned forward to lick his neck. He shivered while returning to squeeze her lower cheek and she uncontrollably wailed with pleasure from riding him. Naruto's fingers alternated between squeezing her flesh and teasing her tit as the brunette's caverns constantly constricted around him. Atalanta refused to let up on grinding her blonde lover's erection as it was shot into her wetness and he rested his forehead against hers once the licking ceased. It was temporarily renewed with their tongues targeting the other's lips and he finally palmed her other orb. She moaned as his thumbs pressed again. Saint her hard buds and the rest of his hands squeezed her quaking flesh before they reached the end of their rope. Atalanta's walls squeezed his manhood and his seeds burst from it while simultaneously filling her stomach. Naruto-kun, you're too incredible for words, Atalanta purred as she brushed her head against his toned chest like a happy kitten, causing Naruto to chuckle while stoking her neck before he caught her by surprise when he turned her to her side with him holding her leg into the air. Glad you're enjoying yourself, but we've only just begun, my lovely wife, Naruto said, which oust. Atalanta smiled back at him as he re-entered her tightness before he started ramming himself into her. With his help, Atalanta's leg remained arched in the air as his manhood struck into her wall. And her bosom jiggled as his lap smacked against her peach. Sweat poured down the lion huntress's forehead as the blonde drove his member into her core and his foreskin struck against her walls. As she moaned and sweated, her eyes slowly began to roll back into her skull and her blush spread across her face. Tears of pleasure formed in her eyes before she shut them and moaned to her heart's content with her arousal being pounded into. Naruto listened to his wife's moans and he started kissing her cat ears, making her moan more, and her back touched his abdomen as he held up leg in place. He et his hand down and caressed her cheek while her bosom now freely jiggled against the ground. Both moaned once again as their release substance boiled from Atalanta's wetness and trailed down the blonde's length. The pair lie on the bed and both smiled as Naruto licked her cat ears while removing his manhood from her. Naruto sat next to her and she rested her head in his lap before he stroked it. A few seconds later, Atalanta was on her back with her legs wrapped around Naruto as he pounded into her warmth. She placed her hands on his shoulders and bucked her hips as he thrashed his member into her walls. Naruto pounded and slammed his member into her warmth as she shook her hips against his. She wrapped her arms around him and once again rubbed her fingers through his hair as she kissed his cheek. He nuzzled her, and they mutually rested their foreheads together. He groaned as she bucked her hips and grinded him while he pumped his glory into her tunnels with her toes curling. Atalanta's eyes became blank in an ecstatic look as they rolled back into her head and she felt his tongue rubbing against hers. She rubbed and licked against his tongue as his member flashed into her wet ends, and she rubbed his backside while holding onto him before her blush grew stronger. Naruto and Atalanta feverishly moaned while tasting each other's tongues as their lips drew together once again. He held onto her close and massaged the flesh as he pummeled into her tightening innards. Naruto banged and pounded his raging stiffness against Atalanta's womb while he gripped her buds once again. After some more tweaking and teasing, Atalanta meowed loudly as the juice from her entrance started to pour onto the bed right as she and Naruto met lips. The kiss came to an end once the orgasm did end. Naruto lay on his back while stroking his wife's cheek while she rested against him. "I love you, Atalanta-chan. Now and forever," Naruto said to his lover, who giggled and kissed him while stroking his whiskers. "I love you too, Naruto-kun, and I am not going anywhere," Atalanta replied as she cuddled up close to her blonde husband, lover, and both fall asleep in each other's arms. Epilogue. 3 years later. Naruto and Atalanta rested on breach towel while watching their daughters and other children playing around in waters of the breach. The two had twins, being daughters, and started raising children that have no homes. Making the lion's wish come true. The first daughter was named Artemis, would had green hair, ocean blue eyes, and has cat-like ears and tail. The second daughter was Sunod. Would had blonde hair with green on the top, forest green eyes, and has fox-like ears and tail. The two wore swimsuits and played with their adoptive brothers and sisters on the breach. Naruto and Atalanta smiled when seeing their family having fun and know that their wish was living in the future with them at each other's side. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.